Hello, I'm Yossi Abram, and welcome to CX Tech Talks, sponsored by Zappix. This is a conversation about the intersection of AI and customer experience. And today, my guest is Eric Karofsky. Eric started VectorX with a simple observation. Most AI initiatives are not successful, not because of the technology, but because companies skip the design work. Eric is bringing over 20 years of product design experience working with the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard, Royal Caribbean, and Global Pharma. He helps organizations implement AI by starting where others don't, mapping actual processes, establishing clear guardrails, and designing for adoption. The results are staggering, and he will speak about that a bit more. 60% increase in collaboration, 35% in cost reduction, 20% in revenue growth, and more on, and so on. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you very much, Yossi. Pleasure to be here. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So to start with, can you share a bit about your background and experience?
Yeah, so as you had mentioned, for about 20 years, I worked for large agencies and consultancies, and I drove the digital experience and digital programs for companies like Royal Caribbean, Fidelity, Michelin, and others. And uh, Did that for a while and really had some great projects. Ultimately, we would end up building some sort of prototype. And then if I did my job right, the company would say, yeah, we want to build that. And then that would lead to downstream revenue for the companies that I was working for. So I then went to the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard, which was really just a transformative experience. Started doing a lot of work in AI back then, before the big craze, and we can talk a little bit about that. But um, I drove the design for their products that they use to do their computational analysis. And for about the past 4 years, I've had my own company, Vector HX, where we do a lot of work for everything from large pharma down to small entrepreneurial companies.
Okay, perfect. So you do bring a lot of experience both in the CX and in the technology and AI. But before we start to speak about all of that, if you had to explain what is AI to your mother or grandmother, how would you do it?
It's funny. I always throw my mother under the bus because I always say, how do you explain that to your mother? So, the first thing that I did is I told her that a lot of people thank ChatGPT because when singularity happens, maybe they'll be the ones that are spared. Um, but um, Seriously, I talked to her about how, AI, it's really like, at least the chat GPTs of the world and Gemini and Claude, it's like the intern that never sleeps and is infinitely patient. It helps you summarize, draft ideas, explain topics, think through things. Um, just like an intern, it gets things wrong. It's improved. It'll continue to improve, but it's not always spot on. But through work and through interactions with it, it gets better and better. But that's really just one slice. That's the stuff that we're seeing so much now. So I talked to her about, for it's been around for a while, like when your credit card gets flagged for some odd transaction, that's AI. When Google Maps reroutes you, that's AI. It just feels different now because now it talks back to you.
That's true. That's true. And when you look at it from your personal experience with AI, and how did you start using it, and how has it grown throughout the years?
Yeah, so as I mentioned beforehand, at the Broad Institute, um, I was working with researchers who were using AI to analyze medical information, things like imaging, complex biological patterns. And my role there was to help design the experience layer. So how do they go ahead and interact with the AI? And in order to do that, I really need to know what their processes were. So I got some, seemingly early exposure to the way that it's working. Again, that was really transformative. But, for me now, I use Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini. I have, the subscriptions to all of them, and I use them constantly and fluidly. They're really a core part of the way that I work. Using Claude Code a lot now through Cursor to build everything from my website to build prototypes for clients. And I'm using Notebook LM a lot. I chat with ChatGPT in the car all the time, which I find just great entertainment because it knows everything. And now I'm starting to work with Cowork a lot, Claude Cowork. It's starting to do some interesting things there.
That's uh, that's really interesting, and the fact that you're using the different tools for different aspects and domains of how can they complement what you're trying to do is really interesting too. So that's great, and so we're trying to move the discussion now from the personal usage of AI into more on the business side and on the customer experience side. So when the companies you're working with, that you're consulting to, how are they trying to use AI in order to enhance customer service and customer experience? How are they doing it now, and how do you see them shifting in the near future and maybe midterm future in their attempts to do that?
Yeah. So this is where a new company that I've co-founded called Fix to Finish really comes into focus. So the mission there is rethinking home services. So think things like plumbing, electrical, HVAC, um, and they're archaic industries. You call on the phone, you wait. Sometimes you don't get the call back. So on the customer service side, AI plays a really big role in what we're building out. So instead of forcing homeowners into these rigid processes and calls, it's now take a picture, describe the problem, answer a few questions, and we'll tell you what's wrong. And so, the goal there is simple of reducing confusion, increasing confidence, and making the whole experience feel just much more transparent. The whole home services industry, it really is anxious. And, we're trying to bring the Amazon moment to it. And AI and customer experiences are just central to that.
That's very true for a lot of small businesses. I think there's a huge leap that they can perform there. And when you're looking at larger companies with large contact centers and large customer service teams, how do you envision AI helping them?
Yeah, well, I think we're still in this awkward world, I think, where AI is starting to get in a very uncomfortable way, where the experience for many of these companies, I think most of these companies, it's taken a hit, because now you're just stuck in these robotics calls, and there's no way at all to ever get a human. And that's really challenging. So, I feel like in this new explosion of technology, companies have been so fast to adopt it to save on costs, that the experience is challenging. And they're jumping into it without fully understanding all of the processes, and understanding the change management associated with it. With that said, I see, and companies like Zappix, certainly, that's really going to start changing. And it will become an increase in the experience. You will be able to get answers faster and get whatever the question that you have, and whatever you need to find out, you'll be able to get that faster and better, and more accurately.
I agree. And I think in the near future, we'll start to see improvements in higher and higher deflection of self-service incoming interactions into successful outcomes. But in the medium term and long-term term, I really envision a more, even of some kind of a proactive customer service. And this is something we have, I have a lot of white hair, gray hair. And when we looked at telecom systems in the past, it was all about how can you predict problems before they're happening? How can you really implement some kind of a proactive customer service approach, methodology at that time, alerts, etc. And I think with AI, with the ability to really process so much data, and there's data is the key here. And the ability to process data, the right data in the right way, can move the really move the needle in customer service from a reactive customer service to a proactive customer service at a very cost efficient way. And
Absolutely. And the challenge that I see with companies right now is, it's twofold. So one is data is key, but it's clean data and accessible data, which is, not necessarily the norm.
very
So
challenging to get, yes.
yeah, that is a big challenge. And then the other one is just the change management associated with it. So, the technology is there. It's now how do companies use it in the most effective way. And that's one of the challenges, and that will get addressed.
Yes. Uh, and how do you see some of the resistance to change by employees or companies because they are afraid of their positions, of their jobs?
Oh yeah. I mean that's a big issue. I mean, there's several big issues in why AI has not taken off in the enterprises yet. One certainly is people are scared. Um, Another one is, companies just jump in without fully understanding the processes and that change management. And then also, I often see, AI right now is still in the hands of, R&D engineers because it's moving so fast and it's so hard to understand the complexities of it that the engineers are the only ones that are capable. But, it's almost like software design of 20 years ago that the engineers are the ones that are designing it visually. And they're not user experience people. So it's hard to use. So if it's hard to use, it's a black box that's not transparent. There's a lot of reasons why you may not choose to adopt it. And that's one of the things that companies are struggling with right now.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of companies that are still piloting and experimenting and looking for those shiny objects that are might be interesting, but the real question they need to many times ask is, what is the business problem we're trying to solve? And if you understand and if you pinpoint the business problem, then you'll find the right tools to do it, whether it's AI or maybe it's just automation or in something else. But there is this, I call it the pilotitis. Everybody's trying to pilot and pilot and pilot. And okay, what are you trying to solve? And that's if you identify that, then you're hitting gold.
Yeah, and just to jump on that, again, when I think about the engineers are the ones who are in control of this, they're building really cool things,
Yes.
but they're not necessarily tied to the KPIs of the business. And there's so many of them that, if they're not tied to the KPIs, they don't end up getting funded. So you constantly have these skunk work projects, and there's frustration because the company isn't making progress, but that's because, early on, no one is working with these engineers to make sure that they're guided towards the real goals of the company.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And when you're looking at all of those workflows or user journeys, how do you try to balance the use of AI while you maintain a human touch in the customer interactions?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where, you need the user experience people to really help define who are the people that you're solving for and what do they need, and make sure that the solution that is being created is developed within their eyes and make sure that it's helpful to them. When I think about, again, that company Fix to Finish, the human touch is still central to this. And when I think about, how AI is really now helping build relationships or can help build relationships. And that's a very human thing. So I do think that, AI as it continues to get better and better will enhance those relationships.
Yes, and I also believe in human in the loop in a lot of areas that AI is currently starting to be implemented. We see that in healthcare a lot with ambient AI and the fact that, yes, the AI does listen to your appointment with a doctor and summarize it, but you have to have that human, that doctor that reads it,
Yes.
approves it, edits it if needed, and only then can submit it. That's a one extreme example, but if you put that human in the loop in the relevant places in the workflow that you can make sure that it doesn't go wild and doesn't hallucinate, then you can start to have better and better gradual implementations of it.
Yeah, you end up becoming a reviewer of information as opposed to creator of information.
Yeah,
And that human in the loop is absolutely essential because, again, the AI, it's still an intern.
yeah.
Will get things wrong.
Yes. Now, there's also something about how do you build the workforce of the future, because in order to be a reviewer, you need to be very knowledgeable. How are you becoming knowledgeable
That's
if you're
right.
not the creator?
Yeah, and all of these, low level positions that are getting laid off now, because the I'm not quite sure what
Yeah,
happens in 10, 20 years.
I'm with you there. At least that, I think that loop of getting those junior people to mid-level to senior expertise is critical in order to be able to review it well. No, I read a lot about certain coders that are using code, cloud code, and so on, and then they review the code, but they have 20 years of experience in order to be able to review the code today. What will happen in 10 years from now when those developers have not written code for 10 years?
That's
So
exactly right.
that would be an
Exactly right.
interesting thing. That's a conversation for 10 years from now.
Yeah.
So, trying to wrap it up a bit, when you look at companies like Zappix and others, how do you see us complementing some of the companies you're working with in the world of that intersection between CX and AI?
Well, yeah, to me, I mean, Zappix fits, into that save movement we've been talking about making customer service simpler and more guided. We think a lot about clarity and trust in the experience, and platforms like Zappix really help bring that life at scale through digital self-service interaction. So, I think Zappix is perfectly poised to really enhance that experience.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you for your time. And it was a great conversation.
Yossi, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all.